hard to imagine that we're in the ruins of ancient Rome, and that's because we're not. Behind me stands the ultimate defense of the ancient world, a wall. Now these terrifying structures kept out enemies, wind, and neighbors who wanted to borrow a lawnmower for centuries. To overcome these gargantuan obstacles, Roman engineers had to invent the siege tower, multi-story wooden towers built on wheels designed specifically so that soldiers could shoot over walls. Which seems like a bit of an over-engineering flex. I didn't really need a tower, I just lifted up my left leg a little bit. It makes you wonder if the Roman Empire fell not because of barbarian invasions, but because they simply lacked basic depth perception.
Cut. That's a decorative garden wall, not a Roman fortification.
Well, why didn't you tell me that before I did the leg thing? As it turns out, actual fortifications like the walls of Jerusalem in 70 AD or Numantia in 133 BC were up to 30 feet high and made of solid stone. To breach them, the Roman army didn't just need ladders, they needed a literal masterpiece of mechanical engineering, the turris ambulatoria. In Jerusalem, to combat these 30-foot-high walls, the siege towers they built were 72 feet tall. In 73 AD, during the siege of Masada, which was a mountaintop fortress, a massive 85-foot tower on a siege ramp was built to tower over the walls. And these towers were not just constructed to look over the walls and shoot some arrows. They were multi-leveled, multi-purpose battering rams that shot a number of different projectiles and carried troops across walls all at the same time. With 3 to up to 10 different levels of attack, the lower levels were heavily reinforced to withstand enemy fire and house a battering ram that would be swung against the base of the wall under siege. The middle platforms were used for troop transport. They would usually feature a retractable drawbridge that could be dropped on top of enemy battlements. And the upper platforms were the ones used to actually shoot projectiles. Bows, heavy crossbows, and ballistas were used at these levels. Soldiers would use their height at this platform to provide covering fire for their fellows at lower levels preparing to attack. Though adopted by the Romans in 200 BC, the siege tower was initially invented by the ancient Egyptians during the Bronze Age. Now, they would use them to look over walls, see what their neighbors were having for dinner, and occasionally shoot arrows at them. But the Romans looked at this simple wooden box and thought, what if we make it 10 stories high and give it a massive metal face puncher?
Exactly. The Romans heavily modified the classic design to maximize maneuverability. Instead of just a single top platform for archers, a standard Roman tower was a 15 to 22 meter tall tactical building. They utilized a modular framework to solve massive structural engineering problems like load distribution. The tower also featured iron-headed battering ram at the base, internal lifting mechanisms in multiple platforms packed with infantry, swordsmen, and catapults.
Yeah, 10 stories of heavily armed, sweaty men in a wooden box on wheels sounds pretty terrifying. Now, if the center of gravity were off on these things, even by a little bit, the whole thing might topple over, like me after 5 milkshakes at Denny's. So the engineers had to do a pretty good job of putting these things together. Now, wouldn't the defenders just set these things on fire? I mean, wood's most famous trait is probably being flammable. That's like its main thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, they thought of that. To prevent the towers from becoming massive campfires, Roman engineers covered the timber frameworks with either iron plates or animal hides soaked in water. This essentially made the towers non-flammable, creating a mobile fortress that could roll right up to the battlements.
To learn more about how these giant wooden filing cabinets of death actually moved, I'm here joined by Professor, an expert in ancient modern physics. Wait, ancient modern physics? Professor, moving a 40-ton tower sounds really exhausting. Why didn't the Romans simply attach a V8 engine to the back or a series of very motivated hamsters?
Well, internal combustion engines weren't invented for another 2,000 years, and hamsters did not have the necessary torque for that. But the Romans did have a combination of internal capstans, pulleys, and oxen and soldiers that pulled the towers from either inside or behind the tower to protect them from enemy fire. It was basically all about mechanical advantage.
Right, mechanical advantage, like when I use a lever to get the last Pringle out of the tube. But Professor, what about the wheels? Surely up to 40 tons of pressure on wooden wheels would just make them explode.
That is actually an excellent point. The wheel design was a major civil engineering challenge. They used massive wooden discs affixed to thick iron axles, and to prevent the wheels from getting stuck in the dirt, the auger was capped with timber beams to create a solid corduroy road. However, if the friction was too high or the ground uneven, the tower became a stationary target for the enemy.
So what you're saying is the Romans basically just invented the world's slowest, heaviest, and most stressful road trip.
But a siege tower wasn't just rolled out in day one. Roman siege warfare was a masterclass in psychological torment by waiting around. Step 1 of a standard Roman siege involved cutting off the city's water and food supply in the hopes that everyone inside would get so hungry and bored that they'd simply open the gates, shake hands with the Romans, and say, "Fair play, you win."
If starving them out failed, only then would the Romans unleash physical violence. First, engineers would construct their massive earthen ramp, the Agger, which was sometimes hundreds of feet long, and the tower would be moved across it. The psychological impact was devastating. Seeing a 60-foot death tower slowly crawling towards your house to claim your soul is generally considered a bad omen in most ancient cultures. Once inside, brutal hand-to-hand street fighting occurred until the city was conquered.
Ultimately, the Roman siege tower proved that victory wasn't just won by swords and sheer force, but by geometry, physics, and a terrifying amount of lumber. It transformed ancient warfare by making walls a much less impenetrable method of defense.
Which begs the final question. If the Romans were so advanced, why did they make everything out of stone and wood when McDonald's play-place plastic is clearly much lighter?
And it comes in fun colors.